My only son, Kevin, used my grief after my wife's death to have me declared mentally incompetent, seizing control of my entire fortune and life's work. My name is Richard Sterling, and I'm 59 years old. And this is about how a single text message saved me from a prison my own flesh and blood had built for me. The evening started like any other Tuesday. I was standing in front of the mirror, straightening my tie. A simple navy blue one. Eleanor, my late wife, had bought it for me years ago. "It brings out the silver in your hair, Rich," she used to say. I could almost hear her voice, a gentle echo in the quiet of my large, empty house. I was getting ready to go to Kevin's for dinner. It was a weekly ritual he had insisted upon after Eleanor passed. "Just to make sure you're eating right, Dad," he'd said. It sounded caring. At the time, I thought it was. Lately, though, these dinners had started to feel different. There was a weird energy, a condescending gentleness in the way Kevin and his wife Jessica spoke to me. Like I was a fragile piece of glass they were afraid to break. They'd ask me if I remembered to take my vitamins, if I'd gotten lost on the way over. Small things. Little paper cuts to my dignity that I couldn't quite put my finger on. I picked up my phone to check the time. That's when I saw it. A text message from David Chun, my lawyer for the past 20 years. A man who never texted unless the sky was falling. The message was just 4 words, all in caps: "Call me immediately." A cold dread washed over me. David wasn't a man for drama. I walked over to my study, the one Eleanor had decorated with rich mahogany and the smell of old books, and dialed his number. My hand was steady, but my heart was doing a drum solo against my ribs. He answered on the first ring. "Rich? Thank God. Don't say anything. Just listen." His voice was tense, urgent. "I just got a notification. An ex parte communication from another firm. Rich, Kevin has filed a petition for an emergency conservatorship over you and your estate." The words didn't register at first. "A what?" "David, what the hell are you talking about?" "He's claiming you're mentally incompetent, Rich," David said, his voice laced with fury. "He's telling a judge that your grief has caused a severe cognitive decline. He's got evidence. Statements from his wife, a concerned new accountant at your firm, even a doctor's preliminary assessment you didn't know you were taking. He's claiming you're a danger to yourself and your finances. He's trying to take everything. The hearing is in 2 days." I sank into my leather chair. The room, once a sanctuary, felt like it was tilting on its axis. Incompetent? My son, my only child, the boy I taught how to ride a bike, the boy whose college tuition I paid without a second thought, the man I was about to have dinner with, was trying to have me legally erased. What shocked me wasn't just the betrayal. It was the sudden, horrifying clarity. It was like a movie where the detective finally realizes the killer was in the house the whole time. The condescending questions. The helpful way Kevin started handling my bills. The documents he'd asked me to sign, saying, "It's just routine stuff for the firm, Dad, don't worry about it." I had worried about it. In the fog of grief after Eleanor died, nothing made sense. She was my anchor, my partner in every sense of the word for 35 years. We built Sterling Designs from a desk in our spare bedroom into one of the most respected architectural firms in the country. She was the soul, I was the structure. When she died after a brutal fight with cancer, the structure collapsed. I was adrift. I barely functioned. For 6 months, the world was a gray blur. And Kevin stepped in. He was my rock. Or so I thought. He started managing my personal finances, to take the burden off. He brought in a new CFO at Sterling Designs, a slick operator named Marcus, because my old partner and CFO, a man I trusted for decades, had retired the year before. "Dad, you need someone aggressive, a real numbers guy for the new age," Kevin had said. I let him. God help me, I let him. I was so lost in my own sorrow, I couldn't see the snake coiling at my feet. The doctor David mentioned. That was Dr. Evans, a grief counselor Jessica had insisted I see. He'd asked me questions that, in hindsight, were clearly designed to test my memory. "What did you have for breakfast yesterday, Richard? Can you name the last 3 projects your firm completed?" I'd stumbled on some answers. Not because I was senile, but because I was grieving. My mind was on Eleanor, not on eggs or building permits. My son had weaponized my love for my wife against me. "Rich? Are you there?" David's voice cut through the haze. "I'm here," I said, my own voice sounding alien to me. The shock was already hardening into something else. Something cold and sharp. "The dinner." "I'm still going to the dinner." "Are you out of your mind?" David hissed. "You can't go there. He's the enemy." "No," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "The first rule of architecture, David, is to know the site. I need to see the foundation of this betrayal with my own eyes. I need to look at my son and see the stranger he's become. Keep this quiet. Don't let them know we know. Just get ready for a fight." I hung up before he could argue. I straightened my tie again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't an act of habit. It was armor. Driving to Kevin's house was surreal. It was a beautiful home, a sprawling modern design that I had, ironically, designed for him and Jessica as a wedding gift. A monument to my love for him, now set to become my prison. Jessica opened the door with a smile so bright it was blinding. "Dad, you made it." We were getting worried. She hugged me, her grip a little too firm, her perfume a little too sweet. It was the hug of a jailer, not a daughter-in-law. The traffic was a little heavy, I lied smoothly. Kevin came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on an apron. He had my wife's smile, but tonight, I saw something else behind it. A flicker of calculation. A predator's patience. "Hey, Dad. Good to see you. Can I get you a drink? A nice glass of wine." His tone was jovial, but his eyes were scanning me, assessing me. "Just water, son," I said, meeting his gaze. Trying to keep a clear head. The look that flashed across his face was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. A flicker of annoyance. A clear head was the last thing he wanted me to have. Dinner was a masterclass in gaslighting. Every sentence was a subtle test, a gentle jab. "Dad, I was looking over some of the firm's recent acquisitions," Kevin began, cutting into his steak. "That plot of land downtown? The numbers seemed a little optimistic. Are you sure you ran all the projections?" He was talking about the Beaumont project, my passion project, a multi-use community space I'd been planning for years. It was a legacy project, more about art than profit. And I knew the numbers backward and forward. The optimistic numbers he was seeing were the cooked books his new CFO, Marcus, had prepared. "The projections are sound, Kevin," I said evenly, taking a sip of water. "Perhaps your new man Marcus is reading them wrong." "Oh, I don't think so," Jessica chimed in, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Marcus is brilliant. He said he found several irregularities. Things that just didn't add up from your recent work. He's worried about you, Dad. We all are." There it was. Laying the groundwork. Painting me as a confused old man who was losing his touch. I just nodded slowly, chewing my food. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just watched them. I watched the way they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. I listened to the way Kevin spoke about my company, using the word I instead of we. "I'm thinking of restructuring the leadership," he said. "Bringing in some fresh blood. The old ways just don't cut it in this market." He was talking about firing people I'd worked with for 30 years. People loyal to me. He was isolating me, cutting off my support system before I even knew I was under attack. After dinner, my grandson, 7-year-old Leo, came and tugged on my sleeve. "Grandpa, can you help me with my Legos? I'm building a big tower." For a moment, just a moment, my heart ached. This was the boy I adored. Was he part of this? No, he was a child. He was just another pawn in his father's disgusting game. I sat on the floor with him, helping him stack the colorful blocks. Kevin and Jessica watched me from the sofa, whispering. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could almost hear their thoughts. Asterisk, look at him. Playing with toys. He's already in his second childhood. Asterisk, when it was time to leave, I stood up. Kevin walked me to the door. "You drive safe, Dad," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. It was meant to be a gesture of affection, but it felt like a brand. Maybe you should think about not driving at night so much. We can arrange a car for you. I looked him straight in the eye. I saw the greed, the impatience, the chilling lack of love. The boy I raised was gone. In his place was a stranger wearing his face. "Thank you for your concern, son," I said, my voice as cold and hard as granite. "But I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself." I turned and walked to my car without looking back. As I sat in the driver's seat, the anger I'd been holding back washed over me, so pure and so intense it felt like it could burn the world down. But it was a controlled burn. The fog of grief had finally, completely lifted, replaced by an ice-cold, crystalline clarity. Kevin thought he was playing with a confused old man. He thought he had outsmarted his father. He forgot who taught him how to play chess. He forgot that I am an architect. I don't just build things, I understand them, from the foundation to the spire. And I understand how to tear them down. He had made one critical, fatal miscalculation. He had given me a 2-day warning. As I drove away from the house I built, I started drawing a new set of blueprints in my mind. Not for a building, but for a demolition. The next morning, I was in David Chen's office at 6 a.m. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of gray and orange. It felt like the dawn of a war. David, who looked like he hadn't slept, had a stack of documents on his desk. "Okay, Rich, here's the battlefield. Kevin's petition is brutal. He has a signed affidavit from Dr. Evans, the grief counselor, stating you exhibit classic signs of diminished capacity, memory loss, and paranoia. He has financial statements prepared by his boy, Marcus, showing erratic and irresponsible spending on the Beaumont project. And he has sworn testimony from Jessica about your increasing confusion and inability to perform daily tasks." "It's a masterpiece of fiction," I said grimly. "He's built a case on a foundation of lies." "And we have less than 48 hours to demolish it," David replied. "A judge will hear this in chambers. It's a low bar for an emergency conservatorship. They tend to err on the side of caution. If the judge sees even a hint of what Kevin's selling, he'll grant it, and then we're fighting an uphill battle to undo it." "So we can't just defend," I said, the blueprint in my mind becoming clearer. "We have to attack. We need to expose the architect of this lie, not just the flaws in his design." For the next day and a half, David and I worked with a ferocity I hadn't felt in years. He was the legal hammer, and I was the strategic chisel. We didn't focus on proving my competence. We focused on proving Kevin's malice. First, I called my real doctor, a man who had known me for 30 years. I had him run a full cognitive assessment that same day. The results were, of course, perfect. I was as sharp as a tack. That was our counter to Dr. Evans. Next, I reached out to my old, retired CFO Henry. I called him at his retirement home in Florida. When I told him what was happening, the gentle, soft-spoken man I knew turned into a lion. "That son of a bitch," he growled. I knew that new kid Marcus was slicker than an oil spill. Henry spent the entire night going through the firm's remote servers. By morning, he had found it, the original untampered financial data for the Beaumont project, hidden deep in an archived folder. He also found traces of a ghost accounting software Marcus had installed, the very tool he'd used to cook the books. This was our bomb. Proof of financial fraud, pointing directly at Kevin's handpicked man. But I needed something more. I needed to shatter the image of Kevin as the loving, concerned son. This part was the hardest. It required me to betray a confidence, to use something Eleanor had told me just before she died. Eleanor, in her final weeks, had been worried about Kevin. Not his love for me, but his ambition. "He's got a hole in him, Rich," she'd whispered to me one night. "He always wants more. Be careful. He sees your legacy as his birthright, not something to be earned." She had also discovered something else. Kevin was in deep financial trouble. He'd made a series of disastrous private investments in high-risk tech startups. He was leveraged to the hilt, on the verge of personal bankruptcy. Eleanor had found the statements by accident. She never told him she knew, and after she passed, I buried the knowledge, thinking his grief and new responsibilities at the firm would straighten him out. I was wrong. It just made him more desperate. The motive. This was the motive. The conservatorship wasn't about protecting me, it was about Kevin gaining access to my liquid assets to save his own skin. David hired a private investigator who, in less than a day, confirmed everything. Kevin owed millions to some very unforgiving lenders. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse feeling like a different man. I wasn't a grieving husband anymore. I was Richard Sterling, founder of Sterling Designs, and I was there to reclaim my life. Kevin and Jessica were already there, sitting with their lawyer. They were dressed in somber colors, the very picture of concerned family. When Kevin saw me walk in with David, his face went pale. He expected me to be served papers at home, to be ambushed. He didn't expect me to be here, suited, armed, and ready for battle. In the judge's chambers, Kevin's lawyer began, laying out the narrative of my tragic decline. He presented the doctor's affidavit, the fraudulent financials, Jessica's tearful and rehearsed account of my supposed confusion. I sat there and listened, my face impassive. I let them build their entire flimsy structure. Then, it was David's turn. "Your Honor," he began, his voice calm and steady. "We are not here today to refute a case built on concern. We are here to expose a case built on greed." One by one, David dismantled their lies. He presented my cognitive test results, a stark contrast to the vague assessment from Kevin's hired gun. He presented the real financial data for the Beaumont project, along with a forensic analysis of the fraudulent books created by Marcus. He showed the judge, clear as day, how the numbers were manipulated. Kevin's jaw was clenched. Jessica was no longer looking tearful, she looked terrified. Then David delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, the petitioner claims he is acting to protect his father's assets. The truth is, he is acting to save himself. We have here a detailed report of Mr. Kevin Sterling's personal finances. He is on the verge of bankruptcy, owing millions to private lenders whose patience, we have learned, has run out." He slid the PI's report across the table to the judge. "This is not a petition for conservatorship," David concluded, his voice ringing with conviction. "This is an attempted financial coup. A desperate, malicious act by a son to defraud his grieving father." The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, read the report. She looked up, and her eyes, cold as steel, landed on Kevin. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "is this true?" Kevin opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared, trapped in the web of his own lies. The judge slammed her gavel down. "Petition denied. And I would advise you, Mr. Chun, to forward your findings on this financial malfeasance to the district attorney's office. This borders on criminal fraud. We are done here." It was over. Just like that. Kevin and Jessica scurried out of the chambers like rats from a sinking ship. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. But my revenge wasn't complete. Tearing down his lie was only half the job. Now, I had to rebuild my own life on the cleared ground. That afternoon, I called an emergency board meeting at Sterling Designs. I walked into the boardroom, the same room where I had felt so lost just months before, and took my seat at the head of the table. I fired Marcus on the spot, security escorting him out of the building. Then, I looked at the board members, some of whom had been swayed by Kevin's whispers. "There have been some fundamental misunderstandings about the leadership and future of this company," I announced, my voice echoing with renewed authority. "Let me be clear. I am not retiring. In fact, I am more engaged than ever. We will be moving forward with the Beaumont project immediately. And there will be restructuring." My message was clear. The old guard was back in charge. As for Kevin, I did not contact the DA. Sending my son to prison was not my goal. His mother would not have wanted that. My revenge was more architectural in nature. I was going to deconstruct his life, piece by piece, and leave him with nothing but the truth of who he was. I cut him off. Completely. I used my legal authority as the majority shareholder to remove him from the board and terminate his employment at my firm. I wrote him out of my will, every last cent being redirected to a new foundation in Eleanor's name, dedicated to supporting families affected by cancer. I blocked his number. I instructed my staff that he was not to be allowed on the premises. He tried to reach out, of course. First came the angry texts, then the pleading voicemails. He and Jessica even showed up at my house one evening. I watched them from the window as they stood on my porch, ringing the doorbell over and over. I didn't answer. I just turned up the classical music I was listening to and went back to reading my book. The last I heard, his lenders had foreclosed on the beautiful house I designed for him. He and Jessica had to sell everything. They moved into a small, rented apartment across town. Kevin took some low-level consulting job. He was ruined. Not by me, but by his own character. I simply held up a mirror, and he shattered. About a month ago, I was on site at the Beaumont project. The foundation had just been poured. Standing there, looking at the solid rebar-enforced concrete, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt since before Eleanor got sick. I had built something that would last. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was from Kevin. It just said, "I'm sorry, Dad." I stared at the message for a long time. I thought about the pain, the betrayal, the son I had lost. Then I thought about the blueprints in my hand, the future I was building. I deleted the message without replying. Some structures are not meant to be rebuilt. They are condemned, demolished, and cleared away to make room for something new. Something stronger. If you like this type of stuff, subscribe us now. Because we sent you a cup of coffee daily. Ha ha ha, I'm joking, but if you really want to stay with this type of story, like and comment your thoughts.